The mocking hour. The autumn rain pelted against the windows of Café Lumière, one of the trendiest establishments in the upscale Jubilee Hills area of Hyderabad. Inside, the warm lighting cast a golden glow over polished wooden tables where the city's elite sipped artisanal coffee and nibbled on overpriced pastries. Among them sat Vikram Malhotra, 32, impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit, his Rolex glinting as he gestured animatedly to his colleagues. "And that's how I close the deal," Vikram concluded with a satisfied smirk, leaning back in his chair. As the chief technology officer at Nexus Innovations, he had just secured a multi-million-dollar contract that would likely earn him another bonus to add to his already substantial bank account. "You always know how to seal the deal." "Vikram," Priya remarked, raising her latte in a mock toast. She was the company's marketing director and had worked with Vikram long enough to know his tactics. "That's what makes you the golden boy of Nexus." The group laughed, their conversation flowing as easily as the expensive coffee they consumed. Through the large glass windows, Vikram noticed a commotion outside. A young man in a faded yellow delivery uniform was struggling with a scooter that had clearly seen better days. The vehicle sputtered, coughed out a plume of black smoke, and then died completely. The delivery rider kicked the stand down with visible frustration and began examining the engine. "Would you look at that?" Vikram said, nudging Rohit, the company's finance manager. Another food delivery disaster in the making. The group turned to look, and Vikram, emboldened by their attention, continued. "I don't understand why these delivery apps don't have better standards. That scooter belongs in a junkyard, not on the streets." "Maybe he can't afford better," Neha, the HR director, suggested with a slight frown. Vikram waved dismissively. "Then find another job. I started with nothing too, you know. My father was just a school teacher, but I didn't go around riding death traps and inconveniencing people." The delivery rider had given up on fixing the scooter and was now walking toward the cafe, a sealed bag of food in his hands. Despite the rain, he hadn't put on his company-issued raincoat and his uniform was soaked through. As he approached the entrance, Vikram raised his voice slightly. "Some people just don't have the drive to improve their situation. They're content with mediocrity." The delivery rider paused at the door, and for a brief moment his eyes met Vikram's through the glass. There was no anger in them, just a quiet dignity that made Vikram inexplicably uncomfortable. The young man, probably in his early 20s, had sharp features softened by exhaustion, his wet hair plastered to his forehead. "Vikram, that's enough," Neha whispered, but he ignored her. As the delivery rider entered, the warm air of the cafe enveloped him, creating a stark contrast to his drenched appearance. He checked the order on his phone and scanned the room, presumably looking for the customer. Vikram leaned toward his colleagues. 10 rupees says he delivers cold food and still expects a 5-star rating." Before anyone could respond, the cafe's atmosphere shifted. From the corner of the room, a figure rose from a secluded table, a young man in his early 20s with a notebook open before him. Vikram froze mid-sentence as he recognized his younger brother, Arjun. "Daniel," Arjun called out, his face lighting up with genuine warmth as he approached the delivery rider. "You made it through this downpour." The delivery rider, Daniel, broke into a relieved smile. "Arjun, this is your order?" "I didn't realize." To Vikram's utter shock, Arjun embraced Daniel in a warm hug, completely unconcerned by the latter's drenched state. "Your scooter giving you trouble again?" Arjun asked, concern evident in his voice. "Nothing I can't handle," Daniel replied, his posture relaxing in the presence of a friend. "Sorry I'm late. I hope you weren't waiting too long." "Not at all. I've been catching up on some reading." Arjun took the food bag and then added, "You should join me. Your shift must be over by now?" Daniel hesitated, glancing down at his wet clothes. "I'm not exactly presentable for a place like this." "Nonsense," Arjun insisted, guiding him toward the table. "You're soaked. At least warm up before heading back out." It was then that Arjun noticed Vikram and his colleagues watching from across the room. His smile faltered slightly, but he raised a hand in acknowledgement before leading Daniel back to his table. Vikram sat frozen, his coffee cooling before him. The easy confidence that had colored his mockery moments ago had vanished, replaced by a creeping sense of discomfort. "Friend of your brother's?" Priya asked, her tone carefully neutral. I don't know," Vikram admitted, watching as Arjun and Daniel engaged in animated conversation across the cafe, their camaraderie evident even from a distance. I've never seen him before, but something in the way they interacted suggested a deeper connection than casual acquaintance. A bond that made Vikram's earlier comments echo hollowly in his mind, weighted with a judgment he hadn't earned the right to make. Threads of connection, the drive back to his luxury apartment in Banjara Hills, gave Vikram plenty of time to dwell on the scene at Café Lumière. Rain continued to drum against the windshield of his Audi as streetlights cast intermittent shadows across his troubled face. He had left the cafe shortly after his brother's arrival, making hasty excuses to his colleagues about an urgent conference call. In truth, he couldn't bear to face Arjun, not after what he had said. Vikram had always prided himself on being self-made. His childhood in a middle-class neighborhood of Hyderabad had been comfortable but modest. Their father, a dedicated mathematics professor, had emphasized education above all else. When he passed away 3 years ago from a sudden heart attack, Vikram had thrown himself into his work, climbing the corporate ladder with single-minded determination. Arjun, however, had taken their father's death differently. Just 19 at the time and starting college, he had withdrawn into himself, his grades plummeting as depression took hold. Vikram had tried to help in the only ways he knew, offering money, connections, practical solutions, but the brothers had grown increasingly distant. As he pulled into the underground parking of his apartment building, Vikram's phone buzzed with a message from Arjun. "We should talk. Breakfast tomorrow at home? Mom would love to see you." Vikram stared at the message. He hadn't visited their family home in Secunderabad in nearly 2 months, always finding excuses about work commitments. With a sigh, he typed back a simple yes. The next morning, Vikram arrived at the modest 2-story house where he had grown up. The familiar scent of jasmine from his mother's garden greeted him as he walked up the short pathway. Before he could knock, the door swung open, revealing Sudha Malhotra, her gray-streaked hair tied in a simple bun, her face lighting up at the sight of her eldest son. "Finally remembered the way home, did you?" she teased, pulling him into a warm embrace that instantly dissolved some of the tension he'd been carrying. "Work has been crazy." "Ma," Vikram offered weakly, following her inside. The house was exactly as he remembered, simple, clean, filled with books and family photographs. In the dining area, Arjun was setting the table, his expression guarded when he spotted Vikram. "Good to see you, Bhai," Arjun said, his tone neutral. At 22, he had their father's thoughtful eyes and lean build. Breakfast was a quiet affair initially, with Sudha filling the silence by updating Vikram on neighborhood news and her volunteer work at the local temple. Eventually, after she excused herself to make more tea, Vikram cleared his throat. "About yesterday at the cafe." "That's why I wanted to talk," Arjun interrupted, his voice soft but firm. "I heard what you said to your colleagues about Daniel." "Before you saw me," Vikram flinched. "I didn't know he was your friend." "Would it have mattered if he wasn't?" Arjun challenged, his eyes meeting Vikram's directly. "Would it have been okay to mock him then?" The question hung in the air, uncomfortable and pointed. Vikram looked down at his half-eaten breakfast. "I shouldn't have said those things," he admitted finally. "But I'm curious, how do you know him?" "He's not from your university, is he?" Arjun's expression softened slightly. "No, he's not. Daniel is my counselor at the Sunrise Youth Center." "Counselor?" Vikram repeated, confused. "But he's a delivery rider." "He's both," Arjun explained. "Daniel has a psychology degree from Osmania University. He volunteers at the center 3 evenings a week, counseling young adults dealing with grief and depression. I started going there 6 months after Dad died when things were really bad." Vikram felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. While he had been climbing the corporate ladder, his brother had been struggling alone. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I tried," Arjun said quietly. "Remember that day I called you from college asking if we could meet? You were in the middle of your big project launch and said we'd talk later." Vikram did remember, vaguely. There had been many such calls he'd brushed aside over the past few years. "Anyway," Arjun continued, "one of my professors noticed I was struggling and recommended the center. Daniel was assigned as my counselor. He's the reason I didn't drop out of college, Vikram. He helped me understand that grief doesn't have a timeline, that it was okay to miss Dad and still move forward." Sudha returned with a fresh pot of tea, settling beside them. "Daniel is a wonderful young man," she added, having clearly heard part of their conversation. He came for dinner last month. Did you know he's putting his younger sister through medical school? And taking care of his grandmother who raised him after his parents died in an accident when he was 12? Vikram hadn't known. He hadn't bothered to know anything about the young man he had so casually ridiculed. The delivery job is one of 3 he works, Arjun continued. He does morning shifts at a call center, evenings at the youth center, and delivers food in between. That scooter you mocked, it belonged to his late father. He keeps repairing it even though it would be cheaper to replace it, because it's one of the few things he has left of him. Each word landed like a blow. Vikram thought about his own reaction to their father's death, how he had distanced himself from the pain by focusing on material success, measuring his worth by his bank balance and job title. Is that why you've been distant? Vikram asked softly. Because I wasn't there when you needed me? Arjun's expression wasn't accusatory, just sad. Partly. But also because sometimes it feels like we're living in completely different worlds now. You've surrounded yourself with people who measure success the way you do, with money and status. I'm not judging you for your achievements, Vikram. I'm proud of you. But yesterday wasn't the first time I've heard you talk about people like they're somehow less worthy, because they have less. Sudha reached across the table, taking one of each of her son's hands in hers. Your father would want you both to find your own paths, she said gently. But he would also want you to remember where you came from, and to treat others with kindness. Vikram nodded, the truth of her words sinking in. I'd like to meet him properly, he said finally. Danielle, to apologize and thank him for being there for you when I wasn't. A ghost of a smile crossed Arjun's face. He's actually organizing a fundraiser for the youth center next weekend. They're trying to expand their services to include more support for students from low-income families. Maybe you could come? I'll be there, Vikram promised, and for the first time in years, he felt something shift between them, a small bridge beginning to form across the chasm that had grown so wide. As he drove back to his apartment later that morning, Vikram's thoughts kept returning to Daniel, a young man who had so little in material terms but was giving so much to others, including Vikram's own brother. The contrast with his own life of comfort and casual cruelty was stark and uncomfortable. For the first time in a long while, Vikram found himself questioning not just what he had achieved, but who he had become along the way. Beneath the surface, the week leading up to the youth center fundraiser passed in a blur of meetings and conference calls for Vikram, but his mind frequently wandered to his conversation with Arjun. Several times, he caught himself about to make a dismissive comment about someone's appearance or status, only to hear his brother's words echo in his head. Would it have been okay to mock him then? It was Friday evening when Vikram found himself driving through an unfamiliar part of the city, following GPS directions to the Sunrise Youth Center. Located in a middle-class residential area, the center occupied the ground floor of an aging but well-maintained building. A hand-painted sign hung above the entrance, and potted plants lined the small walkway leading to the door. Vikram parked his Audi, conspicuously out of place among the modest vehicles outside, and checked his reflection in the rearview mirror. He had deliberately dressed down in jeans and a simple button-up shirt, leaving his designer watch and typical business attire at home. As he approached the entrance, he could hear music and laughter spilling out. A banner stretched across the doorway announcing, Annual Fundraiser Building Bridges, Building Futures. Inside, the center was transformed. Colorful paper lanterns hung from the ceiling. Tables lined the walls with homemade food and handicrafts for sale, and a small stage had been set up at the far end where a group of teenagers was performing a dance routine. The space was packed with people of all ages, creating a warm, vibrant atmosphere that immediately made Vikram feel both out of place and strangely welcome. Vikram, Arjun appeared at his side, grinning. You actually came. I said I would, Vikram replied, surprised by how genuinely pleased his brother looked. This is quite the event. Come on, I'll show you around, Arjun said, leading him through the crowd. He introduced Vikram to various volunteers and attendees, university students, local teachers, families from the neighborhood, all connected to the center in different ways. Many of our volunteers are former beneficiaries, Arjun explained, as they browsed a table of handmade jewelry. That's what makes this place special. It's not just about receiving help. It's about becoming part of a community. Vikram nodded, taking it all in. The center was clearly operating on a shoestring budget. The furniture was mismatched. The paint on the walls faded in spots, but there was an undeniable energy to the place. A sense of purpose that he rarely felt in his sleek corporate office despite all its modern amenities. "There's someone I want you to meet," Arjun said suddenly, gesturing toward a young woman standing near the makeshift stage. "That's Zara, Daniel's sister." The woman turned as they approached, and Vikram was struck by her resemblance to Daniel, the same thoughtful eyes and composed demeanor. She was dressed in a simple salwar kameez, her long hair pulled back in a practical braid. "Zara, this is my brother, Vikram," Arjun introduced them. "The famous older brother?" Zara smiled, extending her hand. "Arjun talks about you all the time." Vikram shook her hand, surprised. "He does?" "Of course," she said. "He's very proud of your achievements, though he does wish you'd visit more often." Arjun looked embarrassed. "Where's Daniel?" he asked, changing the subject. Vikram was hoping to meet him properly. "He's in the back office finalizing some details for the presentation," Zara replied. Her expression softened with unmistakable pride. This fundraiser was entirely his idea. He's been working on it for months. As if on cue, Daniel emerged from a door near the stage, clipboard in hand, looking far different from the drenched delivery rider Vikram had seen at the cafe. He was dressed in a crisp white kurta over jeans, his hair neatly styled, his movements confident as he coordinated with volunteers. "Bye," Zara called, waving him over. Daniel approached, his eyes widening slightly when he recognized Vikram. If he remembered their previous encounter, he gave no sign of it. "You must be Arjun's brother," he said, offering his hand. "It's nice to meet you." "Likewise," Vikram replied, feeling strangely nervous. "Thank you for inviting me." "Any family of Arjun's is welcome here," Daniel said warmly. "He's one of our success stories." Arjun rolled his eyes good-naturedly. "I was a mess when I first came here." "We all start somewhere," Daniel replied. "What matters is the direction we choose to go." He turned to Vikram. "Arjun tells me you work in technology. We could actually use some advice on upgrading our computer lab. Most of our equipment is donated and quite outdated." Before Vikram could respond, an elderly woman approached, leaning heavily on a walking stick. Her face was deeply lined, her white hair tucked under a colorful dupatta, but her eyes were bright and alert. "Daniel, Beta, the children are ready for their performance," she said, her voice surprisingly strong. "Dottie, you should be sitting down," Daniel admonished gently, immediately offering his arm for support. "You promised to rest today." "How can I rest when there's so much happening?" she retorted, though she accepted his support. Daniel turned to Vikram and Arjun. "This is my grandmother, Nasreen Begum. Dottie, this is Arjun's brother, Vikram." The old woman studied Vikram with sharp eyes. "So you're the big businessman. Arjun speaks highly of you." Vikram glanced at his brother, who shrugged with a small smile. "It's nice to meet you, ma'am." "Daniel tells me you saw him delivering food last week," Nasreen continued bluntly. "Were you surprised to see him here today in charge of all this?" Vikram felt heat rise to his face. Yes," he admitted. Nasreen nodded, as if his honesty satisfied her. "People are always more than what you see in a single moment. Remember that." With those words, she patted Daniel's arm. "Now help me to my seat before those children start without me." As Daniel escorted his grandmother to a chair near the stage, Zara explained, "Dottie raised us after our parents died. She was a school teacher for 40 years. Everything Daniel and I know about serving others we learned from her." "She seems remarkable," Vikram said sincerely. "She is," Zara agreed. She never wanted Daniel to work so many jobs. She wanted him to pursue his PhD in psychology, but then I got accepted to medical school and... She trailed off, looking uncomfortable. "Anyway, he insists it's temporary. Once I finish my education and start working, he'll go back to his studies." The pieces were falling into place for Vikram. The broken scooter, the multiple jobs, the dedication to helping others despite personal hardship. He thought about how easily he had dismissed Daniel based on a single glimpse of his life, never considering the depth and complexity that lay beneath the surface. The evening progressed with various performances and speeches. When it was Daniel's turn to address the crowd, he spoke with quiet passion about the center's mission. providing a safe space for young people to find support, develop skills, and build confidence. He outlined their plans for expansion: a better computer lab, more counselors, scholarship programs for students from low-income families. "We're not just a center," he concluded. "We're a family, and like any family, we grow stronger when we support each other's dreams." The crowd erupted in applause, and Vikram found himself clapping louder than anyone. For the first time in years, he felt something stir within him, a desire to be part of something meaningful, something beyond the next business deal or bonus. Later, as the event wound down, Vikram approached Danielle, who was clearing away some plates. "I wanted to apologize," Vikram said abruptly, "for what happened at the cafe." "What I said? It was inexcusable." Danielle looked at him for a long moment. "You weren't the first person to judge me based on my delivery uniform, and you won't be the last," he said finally. "But thank you for the apology. Your work here is incredible," Vikram continued, gesturing around the center. "Arjun told me how much you've helped him." Danielle's expression softened. "Your brother is a remarkable young man. He's overcome a lot." "Thanks to you," Vikram acknowledged. "No," Danielle shook his head. "Thanks to himself. I just provided some guidance. The strength was always his." He paused. "He talks about you a lot, you know. Looks up to you." The words hit Vikram with unexpected force. Had he been worthy of that admiration? As he drove home that night, the contrast between his life and Danielle's kept replaying in his mind. Danielle, who had so little in material terms but gave so much of himself to others, and Vikram, who had accumulated wealth and status but somewhere along the way had lost sight of what truly mattered. The realization was uncomfortable, but also strangely liberating. For the first time in years, Vikram felt the possibility of change, of becoming someone his father would have been proud of, someone worthy of his brother's admiration, someone more like the man he had so carelessly judged. Bridges built Monday morning found Vikram distracted during the weekly executive meeting at Nexus Innovations. As the marketing team presented their latest campaign, his thoughts kept drifting to the youth center, to Danielle's speech about building a community, to Arjun's quiet resilience. When his phone vibrated with an incoming email, he glanced down to see Danielle's name in his inbox. "Everything all right, Vikram?" Priya whispered from beside him. "You seem a million miles away." "Just thinking," he replied, tucking his phone away. "The email would have to wait." After the meeting, Vikram retreated to his office and opened Danielle's message. It was a simple thank you for attending the fundraiser, along with a breakdown of their current funding goals. The computer lab upgrade was highlighted as a priority. They needed better equipment to run coding, workshops and digital literacy programs for underprivileged students. Vikram found himself typing a reply before he had fully thought it through. "I'd like to help with the computer lab. Not just with funding, but with implementation. My company has resources that could be valuable to your students." The response came within the hour. "That's incredibly generous. Would you be available to visit the center again this week to discuss details?" 3 days later, Vikram found himself back at Sunrise Youth Center, this time during regular operating hours. The space felt different, more purposeful, less festive. In one corner, a group of teenagers huddled around outdated desktop computers, while in another, younger children worked on art projects under the supervision of a volunteer. Through an open door, he glimpsed Danielle in a small office, deep in conversation with a young woman who was visibly upset. Zara greeted him, explaining that her brother would be finished with his counseling session soon. "Would you like a tour while you wait?" The center was larger than Vikram had realized, comprising several rooms repurposed for different activities. A reading nook filled with donated books, a small kitchen where cooking classes were held, an area with musical instruments for music therapy sessions. "Most of our equipment is donated or purchased secondhand," Zara explained as they walked. "Daniel applies for every grant he can find, but funding is always tight." "How long has he been working here?" Vikram asked. "Since his second year of university," she replied. "He started as a volunteer, then became a part-time counselor. The director position opened up last year when Mrs. Kapoor retired. The board wanted someone with more experience, but the students campaigned for Daniel. They trusted him." They paused by a wall covered with photographs, students at graduation ceremonies, group outings, award presentations. Zara pointed to a picture of a much younger Danielle standing next to a severe-looking woman in her 60s. That's Mrs. Kapoor. She founded the center 20 years ago after losing her son to suicide. She saw something special in Daniel from the beginning. Zara's voice softened. He was struggling after our parents died. Dottie brought us here for an after-school program because she was working late hours to support us. Mrs. Kapoor took Daniel under her wing, helped him channel his grief into helping others. The story resonated with Vikram, reminding him of his own response to loss, how he had thrown himself into work, not to help others but to distract himself, to build walls rather than bridges. He's lucky to have found his purpose so young, Vikram said. Zara gave him a thoughtful look. It's never too late to find yours. Before Vikram could respond, Daniel joined them, apologizing for the delay. Shall we discuss your proposal in my office? The office turned out to be little more than a converted storage room with a desk, 2 chairs, and shelves overflowing with books and files. Daniel cleared a stack of papers from one chair, inviting Vikram to sit. I've been thinking about your computer lab, Vikram began. What if, instead of just upgrading the equipment, we created a comprehensive technology program? Coding classes, digital literacy workshops, maybe even internship opportunities at tech companies like Nexus. Daniel's eyes widened. That would be incredible, but honestly, beyond what we could manage financially. I'm not just offering money, Vikram clarified. I'm offering partnership. My company has resources, equipment, software, expertise. We have engineers who could volunteer as instructors. What you have here, he gestured around them, is something we lack. Community, purpose, real connection to the people we supposedly serve with our technology. For the next hour, they discussed possibilities, sketching out a program that would leverage both the center's community roots and Nexus's technical resources. As they talked, Vikram found himself increasingly energized. This wasn't the calculated networking he engaged in at industry events. This was something authentic, something that mattered. Why are you doing this? Daniel asked finally, after they had outlined a preliminary plan. Not that I'm questioning your generosity, but this is far beyond what I expected when I sent that email. Vikram considered the question. Because I've been building the wrong things, he said honestly. Apps and platforms that make money, but don't necessarily make life better for people who need it most. Because my brother found something here that I couldn't provide him. He paused. And because I judged you unfairly, and I want to make that right. Daniel studied him for a moment. The best apology is changed behavior, he said finally. My grandmother taught me that. Smart woman, Vikram smiled. The smartest, Daniel agreed. She also says that everything happens for a reason. Maybe your moment at the cafe was meant to bring you here. The idea was strangely comforting, that even his worst behavior might lead to something good, if he was willing to learn from it. Over the following weeks, Vikram became a regular presence at the center. He started by assessing their technology needs, then expanded to other areas where his business expertise could help, improving their website, streamlining their donation system, developing a strategic plan for sustainable growth. To his surprise, his colleagues at Nexus responded enthusiastically when he presented the partnership idea. Priya volunteered to redesign the center's marketing materials. Rohit offered to overhaul their accounting system. Even Neha from HR proposed a mentorship program connecting Nexus employees with center students interested in business careers. I've never seen you this passionate about a project, Priya remarked one evening as they left the center after setting up the first batch of new computers. It suits you. Vikram's relationship with Arjun transformed as well. They began meeting regularly, not just at their mother's house for obligatory family dinners, but for coffee, for movies, for long conversations about their father, their childhood, their different paths. Slowly, the distance between them closed. On a rainy Saturday afternoon, Vikram found himself back at Café Lumière, this time sitting across from Daniel. They had just finished meeting with a potential corporate sponsor for the center's scholarship program, and were taking a moment to regroup. I've been meaning to ask, Vikram said as they waited for their coffee. Your scooter, did you ever get it fixed? Daniel laughed. Temporarily. It's been temporarily fixed about 20 times now. Zara keeps telling me to replace it, but... He shrugged. It was my father's. Vikram nodded, understanding the sentiment now in a way he wouldn't have just a month ago. And the delivery job? You're still doing that along with everything else?
For now, Danielle confirmed.
Between that, the call center, and the youth center, I managed to cover Zara's tuition and our living expenses. Another year and a half and she'll be done with medical school. And then what? Back to your PhD studies? Danielle's expression turned thoughtful. That's the plan. Though the center has become such a big part of my life now, I'm not sure I could leave it entirely. Through the cafe window, Vikram noticed a young delivery rider pulling up on a scooter, not unlike Danielle had that first day. The rider looked tired, his uniform rumpled from a long day's work. Vikram wondered about his story, what dreams he was working toward, what struggles he faced, what strengths he possessed that weren't visible to casual observers. You've changed the way I see things, Vikram admitted, turning back to Danielle. People, situations, even myself. Danielle smiled. That's what bridges do. They connect different worlds, different perspectives. They allow us to cross over and see things from the other side. He paused. Your brother told me you used to build model bridges as a kid. He says you were obsessed with the engineering, the perfect balance of tension and compression. Vikram was surprised. I didn't think he remembered that. He remembers a lot about you, Danielle said gently. Maybe more than you realize. As their coffee arrived, Vikram found himself thinking about those childhood models, the careful calculations, the satisfaction of creating something that connected separate shores, the joy of building something that lasted. Somewhere along the way, he had stopped building bridges and started building walls, around his heart, around his privilege, around his pain. But bridges could be built again. He was learning that, one day at a time. Full circle 6 months had transformed the Sunrise Youth Center. The once cramped computer lab now boasted 20 new workstations, each equipped with industry-standard software. The walls, freshly painted in warm yellows and blues, displayed student artwork alongside infographics about coding concepts. Most significantly, the space hummed with energy as teenagers gathered around screens, collaborating on projects with the confidence of digital natives. Vikram leaned against the doorframe, watching a coding workshop in progress. The instructor, a software engineer from Nexus who volunteered every Tuesday, moved between workstations offering guidance where needed. Among the students, Vikram recognized several faces that had become familiar over the past months. Farah, a brilliant 16-year-old whose family had fled Afghanistan 2 years earlier. Rejan, who traveled 2 hours by bus 3 times a week to attend classes. Anjali, who had already developed a simple app to help her deaf brother communicate. Quite a change from those dinosaur computers they were using before, observed a voice beside him. Vikram turned to find Nasreen Begum, Danielle's grandmother, watching the scene with evident satisfaction. The students did most of the work, Vikram replied. We just provided the tools. Nasreen's eyes crinkled with amusement. Tools matter. My husband was a carpenter. He always said even the most skilled hands are limited by poor instruments. In the 6 months since the technology program had launched, Vikram had come to appreciate Nasreen's wisdom and direct manner. At 83, she still volunteered at the center 3 days a week, tutoring younger children in mathematics, with the precision and patience of her teaching days. Danielle tells me your company is considering hiring some of our graduates as interns, she continued. Vikram nodded. 3 students so far have the skills we're looking for. Paid internships with mentorship programs and potential for full-time positions afterward. Good, she declared. Opportunity is what these children need, not charity. The distinction resonated with Vikram. What had begun as an impulse to make amends had evolved into something more meaningful. A genuine partnership that recognized and nurtured the potential in these young people rather than simply addressing deficits. Have you seen my grandson? Nasreen asked. He was supposed to help me home, but he's probably lost in paperwork again. I think he's in the community room, Vikram offered. The university representatives are here to discuss the scholarship program. Together, they made their way through the center, greeting students and volunteers as they passed. The atmosphere had changed here, too. The space felt more organized, more purposeful, without losing the warmth that had first struck Vikram during the fundraiser. In the community room, they found Danielle deep in conversation with 2 professors from Osmania University. Beside him sat Zara, now in her final year of medical school, taking notes on a tablet. The siblings looked up as Vikram and Nasreen entered, their expressions brightening. Perfect timing, Danielle said, rising to greet them. We were just discussing the expansion of the scholarship program to include postgraduate studies. The meeting concluded shortly after, with the university representatives promising to present the proposal to their board. As they departed, Danielle turned to Vikram with barely contained excitement. They're receptive to funding 5 full scholarships, he explained, including one for psychology research. The implication wasn't lost on Vikram. Your PhD? Danielle nodded, a mix of hope and hesitation in his expression. Potentially. If everything aligns, Zara will be finished with medical school in 3 months, and she already has a residency lined up at Apollo Hospital, which means this stubborn boy can finally pursue his own dreams instead of carrying everyone else's, Nazreen interjected, patting her grandson's cheek affectionately. Daddy, we've discussed this, Danielle said gently. I wasn't putting my life on hold. This center, these students, they are part of my dream too. And now they can be part of your research, Zara suggested. Your proposal on trauma-informed approaches to youth counseling is exactly what this community needs. Vikram watched the family's interaction with a sense of privilege, to witness their love for each other, their shared commitment to service despite personal challenges. It made him think of his own family, the bridges he had been rebuilding there as well. Speaking of dreams, Vikram said, I have something to show you all, if you have a moment. Curiosity piqued. They followed him to the center's entrance where a small crowd had already gathered. Outside, parked at the curb, was a gleaming new motorcycle, not flashy or expensive but sturdy and reliable, with a small cargo attachment perfect for deliveries. What's this? Danielle asked, confusion evident in his voice. Your new ride, Vikram explained. Before you object, it's not from me personally. It's from the center's transportation fund, which the board approved last month for staff who commute between multiple jobs. Danielle stared at the motorcycle, clearly torn between practicality and sentiment. My father's scooter is safely stored in your building's garage, Vikram assured him. I spoke with Zara. The scooter stays in the family, but this is for your work, for practicality and safety. The students took up a collection too, added Arjun, who had emerged from the center to join them. They contributed almost 20% of the cost. That's how much they value you getting here in one piece. Danielle ran a hand over the motorcycle's seat, visibly moved. I don't know what to say. Thank you is customary, Nasreen suggested dryly, though her eyes shone with pride. The moment was interrupted by the arrival of a food delivery rider, a young woman on a scooter not unlike Danielle's old one. She looked harried, juggling multiple orders as she checked addresses on her phone. Sunrise Youth Center, she called. That's us, Vikram replied, stepping forward to accept the large order of food they had arranged for the day's coding showcase. As he paid for the delivery and added a generous tip, Vikram couldn't help but think about how differently he viewed the young woman now, compared to how he might have 6 months ago. Instead of seeing just a delivery rider, he saw a person with her own story, her own struggles and strengths, her own dignity. The afternoon unfolded with presentations from the coding students, proud parents taking photos, volunteers serving food, and community members exploring the transformed center. Vikram found himself moving between groups, no longer feeling like an outsider, but as part of this ecosystem of support and growth. At one point, he overheard a conversation between 2 parents that made him pause. My Farah talks about this place all the time, one mother was saying. Before she was so withdrawn after everything we went through leaving Kabul. Now she has purpose again. Same with my Rajan. The other parent nodded. These skills they're learning, they're not just about jobs. They're about believing in possibilities. Believing in possibilities. The phrase echoed in Vikram's mind as he continued through the crowded room. Wasn't that what he had lost sight of in his pursuit of success? The possibility that people could be more than their circumstances, that connection could be more valuable than competition, that true worth couldn't be measured in rupees or titles. Later, as the event wound down, Vikram found himself on the center's small rooftop terrace with Arjun, Danielle, and Zara. The evening air was cool, the city lights spreading out before them like earthbound stars. I've been offered a promotion, Vikram announced suddenly. Chief Innovation Officer for Nexus, overseeing all new product development. That's fantastic, Arjun exclaimed. Congratulations, Bhai. I haven't accepted yet, Vikram continued. I'm considering a counter-proposal instead. The others looked at him questioningly. I want to establish a social impact division, he explained, focused on developing technology solutions for underserved communities, educational institutions, small businesses struggling to compete in the digital economy. Real problems, not just first-world conveniences. That sounds ambitious, Danielle commented. It is, Vikram acknowledged. It means lower profit margins initially, more complex metrics for success. The board isn't entirely convinced, but you are, Zara observed. Vikram nodded. For the first time in years, I'm building something I truly believe in. Something my father would have been proud of. He would have been proud of you anyway, Arjun said quietly. He always was. The simple statement brought an unexpected lump to Vikram's throat. He looked at his younger brother. No longer the withdrawn, grieving boy of 3 years ago, but a confident young man with compassion and purpose. We're opening a branch center in Secunderabad next month, Danielle mentioned, changing the subject as if sensing Vikram's emotion. Closer to where you grew up. They need program directors, volunteers. Are you offering me a job? Vikram asked, amused. A partnership, Danielle clarified, like the one we've built here. The conversation shifted to plans for the new center, the scholarship program, Zara's upcoming medical residency. As they talked, Vikram realized how much his world had expanded in these past months. Not in terms of wealth or influence, but in human connection, in purpose, in perspective. Later that evening, after dropping Arjun at their mother's house, Vikram took a detour on his drive home. He found himself passing Café Lumière, the place where his journey had begun 6 months earlier with a moment of casual cruelty that now seemed to belong to someone else. The cafe was busy, golden light spilling onto the sidewalk where patrons chatted at outdoor tables. Through the window, Vikram could see a young delivery rider entering with a bag of food, being greeted warmly by the customer who had placed the order. A small moment of human connection, unremarkable to most observers. But Vikram knew better now. He knew that such moments were the threads from which the fabric of community was woven, that behind every interaction lay full, complex lives worthy of respect and understanding. He continued his drive home, the city passing by his windows, not as a backdrop to his success story, but as a living tapestry of countless interconnected lives. For so long he had seen himself as separate, defined by what he had achieved and acquired. Now he understood that true worth lay in what you gave, not what you gained. In bridges built, not barriers erected. In seeing the dignity in every person regardless of their circumstances. The realization wasn't an endpoint, but a beginning, a commitment to continued growth, to building a life that honored not just his own potential, but the potential in others. There would be missteps along the way, old habits reasserting themselves, new lessons to learn. But the direction was clear now, the foundation solid. That night, as Vikram drifted toward sleep, he found himself thinking of his father, not with the ache of loss that had driven him to distance himself from painful memories, but with gratitude for the values his father had lived by: integrity, compassion, the belief that every person deserved dignity and opportunity. In the end, those values had found their way back to him, carried by the most unexpected messenger, a young man on a broken scooter, whose worth Vikram had so carelessly dismissed but whose example had ultimately shown him a better way to measure a life. Full circle, he thought, as sleep claimed him. We all come full circle eventually, if we're fortunate enough to recognize the path when it appears before us. And sometimes, that path begins with a single moment of recognition, of seeing someone truly, perhaps for the first time, and in that seeing, finding our way back to ourselves.